be getting more from what you have. Dwayne is a livestock and feed extension specialist with the Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture. He provides information and recommendations to match feedstuffs to livestock feeding programs with a focus on maximizing livestock productivity and well-being. Dwayne has 25 years of experience advising clients in various aspects of livestock management, ration development, forage production, and utilization across Western Canada. Dwayne has a Master's of Science focusing on grazing ruminant nutrition and a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture. Dwayne is a professional agrologist and served on the SIA Council as the Northwest Branch Counselor, President-elect, and President of the SIA, and also received the SIA Recognition Award in 2023. Welcome, Dwayne.
Thank you, Dina. Just confirm that you're seeing my screen.
Yep.
Seeing the presentation. Excellent. So really, I'm going to be more biographical and more philosophical than perhaps most people would be thinking you're going to get from a presentation entitled Getting More from What You Have. But really, it has a lot to do with who I am and how I grew up and what I've seen. There's lots of observations from growing up in agriculture. On this map that you're seeing right here, there's lots of locations that are significant to me. This spot right here, south of Asquith and west of the 673, that's the farm where I grew up. It's also the farm where my father grew up, his father grew up, where my great-grandpa built the house in 1927. Mile south and 3 miles west, in the bottom left corner of the map, that is the farm where my grandpa Russell was born and raised. If you go to the spot up in the northeast corner of the map, right at the top of the map there, that's the McKee farm. That's where my grandma Mona Russell was born and raised. If you look at the spot to the west of the 376, that's where my grandpa Rod and grandma Mona established their dairy farm on just up the hill on Eagle Creek. And then the town of Asquith, that's where I started out. That's where my uncle Clint had a Massey Ferguson dealership. That's where my grandpa Rosa retired to, and his retirement farm, he had a half section north of the tracks, along with farming the McKee section. So that's kind of where I hung out growing up. Literally, my grandpas were my babysitters. When mom needed a break, I got sent to a grandpa's place and I rode in a tractor. So that's kind of why that part of the world's pretty important to me. This is the farmyard. The stuff on the east side or the right, the right side of the road is the yard I grew up in. The house that Grandpa built in great-grandpa built in 27. His brother Fred was across the road, and it gets really confusing in the Summach genealogy because August Summach had a number of boys that he named August, Fred, and William, and August, Fred, and William all had boys that they all named August, Fred, and William. And so there was a lot of, you got to know which one you're talking about. So August and Fred and William moved out to Western Canada in 1906. A couple of the boys had actually come out in 1903 and 1904 scouting for land from Ontario. Their dad had been brought over from Germany in 1957 is when their dad, August, immigrated to Upper Canada before Canada was a country. And at the turn of the 1900s, they were looking for land that wasn't full of rocks and roots, and so that's what brought them out to the Asquith area. This is a picture of my grandpa Summach. I know that this would have been taken in the fall of 1981 because I would have been visiting Grandpa at the farm instead of I was living at the farm. We moved to the farm in 82. It's I know it's 81 because I'm drinking a bottle of Coke, and there's only one way I was getting Coke at the farm, and that was if it was at Grandpa and Grandma's place, not at Mom and Dad's place. So, and then the following fall in 1982, Grandpa had an aneurysm, so he wouldn't have been available to take a picture in front of the combine. This is my Grandpa Rod with his Super WD9 and his International Combine. That'd be, I know the bluff of trees that's on the south side of, on the McKee section. So at this point, he was semi-retired. He'd sold the dairy farm to his son Keith, to my uncle Keith, and so then he was just a grain farmer. Believe it or not, he was farming about 1,100 acres with that Super WD9. This is my Grandpa Rod on his threshing machine. This would have been in the fall of 1984. He kind of got that threshing machine all tuned up and fired up. Guess he had some extra time because he sold the McKee section to my mom in 1983. So he had downsized by 5 quarters. He fixed that machine up, and then he donated it. They used it, and then he donated it to the Western Development Museum. Here's that WD9, 8 years later. He mounted a buzzsaw to it, and we were cutting wood in the yard. I would have been 16. We had a wood-fired furnace, so we could either spend a day cutting wood, blocking wood up in October when it was nice, or you could spend all winter with the chainsaw just cutting enough to keep ahead and keep the fire going. That summer, I was 16. I had got my license in the summer and got sent with the 3-ton truck up to help Grandpa haul grain to the elevator, because he still only had that 3/4 ton truck, so he could haul about 65 bushels a week to the elevator. So I was sent with the 3-ton truck to go help him finish emptying his bins and shoveling the bottoms out. And at 75 years of age, he could bury me. He had a big old heavy steel grain shovel. It was a 1/2 bushel scoop, and I had a nice light aluminum scoop, but he could his experience just buried me. And so part of what I'm showing you here is farmers have been resilient. They've done a lot of things for a long time using what they got. We see that we're still using that WD9. You see the bale elevator to the right side there. It's been modified so we can just, as the blocks of wood were coming off the saw, they could be put on the bale elevator, and that got them up into the dump truck, so we could make a good pile, move the wood around. Where have I been? I've been all over Western Canada. We started out at west of Saskatoon at the farm, did university, did a quick 6-month contract with the Western Beef Development Center at Lanigan. From there, I was over to Unity with the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association on a term contract as a rangeland agrologist. From there, I was out to Unifeed in Olds, Alberta. And then in 2003, I found myself in need of this ruminant nutritionist. Was found he was needing another place of employment, and so I ended up working for the Manitoba Agriculture, Food and Rural Initiatives. My office was in Beausejour, so east of Winnipeg. In 2009, I moved back to Kindersley to be closer to home. And in 2023, I transferred with the Ministry of Agriculture into the same position, just different location, to where I currently am in Outlook. This is kind of the regions that I've been responsible for as I've worked in those different places. So when I was at Unifeed, one of the most innovative things I saw, one of our clients was a very large feedlot at Brooks, Alberta. And in 2002, they didn't have very much silage. And so they brought to us a concept from Purina Mills International, which was a supplement, formulating a supplement or building a supplement for them that didn't require any silage to go with it. So if you're feeding cattle, you're usually looking for some effective fiber in their diet. The concept behind the Purina supplement, it was called Impact, was that there was enough components in that supplement that it limited the willingness of animals to eat their TMR. So they broke it up into smaller, more frequent meals during the course of a day. So I've kind of seen quite a bit of the prairie. A lot of it's the dry Palliser Triangle. I've also seen quite a bit of the eastern prairie, that east of Winnipeg, east of the Red River, and I learned about what it looks like to have too much water. One of the concepts that stands out for me is the concept of the three-legged stool. You've got your people, you've got your production, and you've got your finances. And you got to keep all three legs balanced or your stool wants to tip over. And so that's one of the concepts that it comes from holistic resource management, but it's one that's really stuck with me in terms of how can I help clients? Well, it's helping them identify what are they strong at, where are they needing help, what do they need to put some focus on, and where can they make the most difference? Asking the question why. And asking the question why up to 5 times will help you get to the heart of the matter. Quite often a client will come to you and they'll be telling you one thing and they're looking for some guidance or advice or an answer. And you have to ask why in order, and you might not ask why directly, but you're asking why to get to the heart of the matter. Why is it that they got to where they're asking this question? Why are they asking you for help? Sometimes it's a really straightforward answer, and that's good. But sometimes if you don't ask the why, you miss the real question that they're asking. As I mentioned, growing up in West Central Saskatchewan, things influence how you think. I remember living through a dust storm in 1988. There was 4 or 5 days where we had dust storms that looked like this. My grandpas lived through the 30s. They were old enough that they were farming, and the Dust Bowl of the 30s definitely affected how they made decisions and the choices they made regarding agronomic practices. Necessity is the mother of invention. Now, I throw this up here. We don't see coil packers being used a whole lot anymore, but coil packers, this was one of my grandpa's cousins invented the coil packer. He saw his kid playing with a coil spring out of a car in the garden and saw the pattern that it left behind. And so he developed a way to make a coil packer, and a lot of his brothers and cousins helped him out getting that business started. The business became FlexiCoil. FlexiCoil went on to be a fairly significant manufacturer of ag equipment in Saskatchewan and has subsequently been sold to Case New Holland. But I look at it in terms of it's not just FlexiCoil, it's Borgo, it's Seedhawk, it's all of those manufacturers that have advanced lots of technology related to broadacre farming. There's the air seeders, there's the commodity carts, the air hoe drills, the disc drills, the Barton opener comes to mind, large boom sprayers, the parallel openers, variable rate application, and the list just keeps going on. And it's a function of when farmers see that they need something, and there's nothing that's available to do it, they'll figure a way out. They'll figure a way to make it happen. My great-grandpa had ridiculously good flax crops, and Dr. Harrington from the university heard about these flax crops that were doing so well, and he came out to find out why. And well, it was my great-grandpa had welded a band onto his double-disc press drill to limit how deep it would seed, so that his flax was seeded at 3/4 of an inch of depth, no deeper. Things like that. Just day after day, year after year, farmers find a way to make things better. Another philosophical concept that comes back around, and it's from holistic resource management. It's called the planning cycle, however you want to refer to it, but it's plan, do, check it, adjust, do it again, or plan, execute, monitor, adjust, plan, implement the plan, monitor how the plan's working, tweak the plan. Okay. This concept is vital in life and in agriculture. And so what you will see is something happens. So we had a plan. We're going to water the cows in the dugout. Cows fall through the ice and die. Plan wasn't very good. We need to make an adjustment to the plan. Well, let's figure out how to water the cows without being on the dugout. And all of a sudden, there's all kinds of different ways to water cattle in the winter, with and without power. What I have here is an example of a mining tire trough. It's being pumped out of a well, but how do you keep the water line that's all above ground from freezing? Well, if you elevate it really high, you'll get the pipe to drain. But how do you get the pipe that's going back down the well to drain? Like, how do you get the water out of there? Well, Grandpa Rod, in his infinite wisdom, would always go, well, we'll just drill a small hole in the pipe just above the foot valve. And so that's how you would keep the water in the pump, but you would let the water drain back so that it was below the frost line, so that there was no ice in the pipe when the pump started back up. There's lots of different ways to water cattle now. Again, this has got the electric eye, but the bowl was freezing up even with the drain back feature, just because of the wind chill. So farmers being the way they are, well, let's figure out how to protect the bowl from wind. So basically there's a freezer there on the outside of the building. That's where the trough is. Inside the building's heated with propane, set on a thermostat. Got a little bit of extra power from wind generator to fire the igniter. So there's different ways of keeping your pump house warm. Pump house like this is super insulated. You got doors. The cows have to figure out how to push the door in so that they can get to the bowl. But that is basically just heated with the thermal heat coming up from the well inside the building. Lots of these mining tires are around now. If you bury three or four tires in the ground and then put one on top, put a plug in it. Now the heat from the ground can just come up and keep it open. Little bit of tire tube hanging down into the water keeps the wind from blowing in and freezing the float. And so on the coldest mornings, even when he's only got 15 or 20 animals on a tire like this, there might be a 1/4 inch ice that he has to punch down into the water and restore access. Large capacity troughs, expensive. They were expensive, right? So farmers are always looking for a way to build it cheaper. And so, okay, well, let's build basically a feed bunk and line it with a tarp. It'll hold water. Need an even bigger trough? Well, there you go. Same concept. Big chunk of plastic, big tarp. Farmers are always repurposing something, whether it's a tanker truck or whether it's a rock picker. We'll find a way to turn it into something else. And there's some pretty unique float valves that have been developed on farm. Basically, this is taking a water heater tank, putting some drill stem down through it, and then you use a basketball, a rubber basketball as a float that'll come up and seat against the standpipe. And so that's how that float is there. Gives you big volume in a hurry. Pretty ingenious way of creating a float. A little harder to adjust the depth, but when you build it for yourself, you do what you need to do. Working in eastern Manitoba, it was very difficult to make high quality dry hay because the number of days that it rained was lots. One year I did the math, went back and looked at the Environment Canada data, and there was less than 3 occurrences of 3 days without rain during the April through October period. Really hard to make dry hay. And so that's where I learned about forage preservatives and actually artificially drying hay with hay dryers. Quite often, beef producers would move beyond this and move into wrapping their bales to limit their exposure to weather risk. And so basically, we would see guys with under 100 cows put the bale preservative on their baler. Guys over 100, 150 cows, they'd be renting the wrapper. Guys that had 200 cows would buy a wrapper. And guys with more cows would start bagging silage. These are silage bags, not grain bags. And then if you got into the 300 cows or more, then we were probably making pit silage. But all is a way to preserve feed, make lots of high quality feed in a hurry. That's what making silage does. One of the other things that has been around for a long time, I like to say I went to school to learn why what Grandpa taught me worked. He talked about seeding sweet clover in his wheat all the time prior to fertilizer being available. He also talked about, okay, well, after I harvested a hay crop and I needed to turn it into something else, well, I would grow something else to use that ground. You don't let it sit idle for very long. And so the concept of relay cropping or cover cropping really isn't new. It's just been found again. When I was in university, I went up to a field day at the research station in Melfort, and there was a guy by the name of Dwayne McCartney going on and on about Italian ryegrass. And so that was in the mid-90s. And here we are. This is a picture from last year. Somebody in the area had a cover crop that, following their barley silage crop, they had Italian ryegrass and oats and sorghum growing in a mix following their silage crop. I throw this slide of alfalfa up there because I believe from a livestock perspective and actually from a crop perspective, the nitrogen fixing capability of alfalfa is incredible. It's one of those underutilized advantages, and it's the big advantage for a mixed farm. But what I'm really looking at here is the innovation that comes from the advancements in genetics. And what I'm showing you a picture of here is a chunk of ground that my brother farms. He's farming about 10,000 acres, and he's got a half section that's got a creek running through it and some abandoned oil wells down in the creek bottom where there's a lot of salinity. And in 2010, there was a project put in by the Saskatchewan Forage Council. The adopt report location is listed there at the bottom of the screen. And my brother's comment to me was, I just want to seed something that keeps me from going in to try and crop, and I'll keep losing money as long as I keep trying to crop it, but I'll keep trying to crop it because I want to keep the weeds down. What should I seed? And I said, well, let's talk to John. John Hauer was the forage specialist in Kindersley at the time. I think he's got a project. And John said, this sounds like it's a good fit for this project. And so what I'm showing you here is a picture of some salt-tolerant alfalfa seeded alongside some salt-tolerant grasses. The alfalfa was actually doing really good. Different kind of alfalfa, different grass, moving across the plots. And so the meadow foxtail actually managed to establish in the highest salinity areas best, but the salt-tolerant alfalfas actually did pretty decent at getting something established, and it helped pull down the water table. Imagine that, sitting right beside a creek that there was a high water table. And it managed to keep my brother from trying to farm that 35 acres. And in return, a few of his neighbor got some free feed. Some other things that I've seen, well, there's self-feeding. Growing up, we self-fed at the chaff pile or the straw stacks. Here's a picture of Ken Adair out at Coronation. He'll make small piles of silage around his farm, and then he'll use electric wire to limit feed the silage base. And so it takes away the requirement to have a mixer. Now it limits what you can do, but it is a way of feeding silage with very little infrastructure investment. There's lots of people bale grazing. We can either set the bales out in advance in the fall, get the strings off, or we can choose to put the bales out once a week, whatever. There's different ways to make it happen. But in the end, we create this distribution of manure and carbon product that puts nutrients back out on the landscape. And where you put the bales helps determine where you're distributing those nutrients. Swath grazing is a similar concept. My grandpa Rod would always tisk me on it. What are you doing wasting good feed? Like, combine the grain, feed the straw, and limit the grain back out, and you'd have some grain left over to sell. But when you look at, okay, if I don't have a combine, but I want to feed a higher energy feed to my cows without having to haul the buckets of grain out, this is one of those things that can work. Does it have limitations? Yep. Have we learned about them? Yes. But there's technology that helps us, and that technology comes in the form of portable fence, electric fence. Corn grazing, same thing can be said there. We've learned lots. Again, we don't grow corn for grain in this part of the world because we typically don't get enough days. I do know some people that are trying to combine grain. It ends up as high moisture grain, and so you end up putting it in a bag, or you have to dry it. But why do we grow corn? Well, simply put, we can grow a lot of tons on every acre of land. And so there's a lot of operations that have nearly doubled the amount of cows that they're feeding because they've paid attention to how much productivity they can get out of their land, whether it be through corn or whether it be through nutrient inputs. So one of my clients has quite a few cows, about 750. likes to corn graze, but also likes to make sure that his cows have adequate mineral nutrition. And so what we came up with, what we've kind of settled into, is he does put out a partial TMR. And so he feeds his 750 cows one mixer load a day. Gets them their pound of supplement, gives them a few pounds of oat hulls, gives them a couple pounds of grain, makes it a nice tasty thing, and they come after it. Well, he didn't really like putting it out on the ground, because even though the ground was frozen, they were still leaving stuff behind. And so I suggested to him, well, what about using some mine belting? Just put the mine belting down on the ground, you got someplace to put it on, and now they'll be able to lick it off the mine belting. And so he did that, and he did that for a couple months, and he looked at the mine belting and he went, yeah, but they still step over it, and they spread it off and they kick it off. And so he come up with the idea of, well, let's just pull the sides up a little bit, make a bit of a trough. It's amazing how just giving it a 9 or 10 inch lip there, and all of a sudden the cows don't step all over it. They can still step into it. They're not going to wreck anything, but they're less likely to step into it. And so this has been really, really convenient. And again, another example of how farmer ingenuity sees a problem and figures a way to solve it. Delivering TMRs is always, there's lots of value in putting it in a bunk. And it allows us to put a lot more feed, limit how much space that we need when we compile it up. But then there's the issue of, what do you do with the feed that's left over? Well, when you have this problem, you figure a way out. And so these bunks actually have no bottom in them. And so once or twice a week, they grab the front end loader and they go pick up the bunk by the middle post sticking up there, the pipe going across the top that keeps the cows from climbing into the feeder, and they just pick it up and they move it to a new spot. When I was in Manitoba, I had the privilege of being involved with some gentlemen by the name of, last name was Blights, Kevin and Cameron Blight, and their dad. And there was lots of discussion about, we need to be growing switchgrass, because if we co-burn switchgrass with coal, it will reduce the sulfur dioxide emissions by something over 80%. So you add 5% switchgrass to your coal and you reduce your sulfur dioxide emissions by over 80%. So there was lots of interest in how we're going to do this. There's going to be a big market. And so then we also had a whole bunch of hog producers in the southeast corner going, well, how much more switchgrass can we grow if we put manure down? Because then we have a way of applying manure to something else that we aren't trying to eat, aren't just putting it on pasture for cows to graze, and we don't really get the nutrients taken away. If we actually apply it and then we harvest the switchgrass and it goes away and gets burnt somewhere, that's actually going to move our nutrients around. And so that's what kind of triggered this project. Lights already had the switchgrass fields established. When the Stewart Burn Piney Ag Development Association approached them to buy the switchgrass seed to establish, they kind of went, well, we already have the switchgrass field established. How about we just get some hog manure and apply it to our field, and we can gather the information that way. And so that's what happened. That switchgrass got harvested for seed, and then the biomass was baled up. It was hauled up to the pelleting plant at Arborfield, Saskatchewan, turned into pellets. The pellets were hauled back to Oakville, Manitoba, north of Carman. And they installed a pellet stove in their shop, and they heated their shop with switchgrass pellets. So we were able to determine thermal capacity. So it took more kilograms of pellets than it would have if they'd been burning wood-based pellets, but not that many more. And yeah, imagine that. You apply hog manure to grass and it grows more tonnage. So that information exists. It's out there. Evaporative cooling for broiler barns. Lots of different things happen. This is in Canada. This isn't in the southern states. We actually have heat stress in the summertime in a broiler barn. And so it was interesting to me. Basically, it's just a big cloth curtain that water drips down and the air gets sucked through, and it cools the air coming into the barn. Really simple concept. Takes a little bit of thought process, and you want to make sure you got your valving right so that you get the drip rate just right. Because you can make a mess in a hurry. But yeah, these are the kind of things that are being used in livestock production. I would be remiss if I didn't say that a big chunk of my career has been spent working in teams. And you meet lots of different people and you do lots of different things together. This is a couple of the teams that I've worked with in Manitoba for various things. The top picture there is for the Manitoba Grazing School. We put her on in Brandon for basically a decade. You meet lots of people, you maintain relationships. One of the people in that picture is Dr. Kim Ominski at the University of Manitoba. I just shared some data with one of her grad students here yesterday. You maintain relationships, you get to know people. It's really an important thing in the agriculture industry. These are the people that I've been working with in Saskatchewan. The bottom right corner, that's kind of when we just got started. Lots of people in that photo have retired or have moved on to management, executive level positions. The people in the top left there, that's the day we were down in Regina to receive a Deputy Minister's Award for the work that our team has did on drought response. So those pictures are just to say there are lots of people, there will be lots of contacts. That's the part of this job that's great, is you will meet lots of people, you will see lots of things. Pay attention. You never know when the next opportunity is going to come around. And you need to ask yourself why. Why are you doing it? Well, this is a big chunk of why I do what I do. It's to be able to provide for those 4 kids. They have been a blessing and a joy, and they're also a big chunk of why I have no hair left. But that's the reality, is you better know your why. Figure out your why. What are you? My dad watched my grandpa Rod retire 3 times. And every time Grandpa Rod retired, he had to work harder. And my dad said he was never going to retire because watching his father-in-law retire just and get more work, he says, why would I retire? The other driving philosophy has been, if you enjoy what you're doing, you're not really working. The other phrase is, retirement is simply doing what you want to do when you want to do it. And so you'll find people like Dave Cubbin, who's retired, but he hasn't really left the industry. They're still doing lots of things. That's because they enjoy what they're doing, and it comes through. When you meet somebody that enjoys what they're doing, you know that they enjoy what they're doing. And one of the things about the job that I'm currently in is that you get views like this. You end up on a road and you're overlooking a lake, a river valley. And this road drives right down to the river, goes by a yard site and into the pasture and right down onto the beach. And so really it's a function of how do you look at it? Is that the end of the road? Or is that just the start of your next adventure? And so how you approach life, how you approach your work, it's a mindset. It's how you choose to view it. And so that's what I'd like to leave you with today. And so that concludes my presentation. We got some time for some questions, I guess. So.
Thank you, Dwayne. That was very introspective.